It's Halloween. Do you know what that means?
What?
Lots of children are coming to our doors.
Oh, yeah.
You know how much I like children. Why are you laughing?
I guess, yeah, this time of year, though, we like to watch horror movies and
Who doesn't? That's pretty much all I watch.
Halloween-themed movies.
Yes.
So,
let's start with
all
30.
different.
Yes, yes. All very different now that I
Very
think
different
about it.
movies, yeah.
But let's start with the vampire one, 30 Days of Night.
Now, the buddies are back. In their most spectacular adventure ever.
This dog is afraid of nothing.
Good movie.
It was actually a pretty good movie.
Yeah, you've never seen this before.
No, I had never seen it before. I remember when it came out and didn't really care about vampires very much. So I was like, eh. And I don't like, it's not Josh Hutcherson.
Josh Hartnett?
Hartnett. Right. I don't really care for him. So.
Not really dig him.
I don't know, what do you like about 30 Days a Night?
I remember seeing this movie when I was freaking younger when it came out, and I remember it just being sweet because it was like a vampire movie where the vampires are like really mean. I know that sounds like that's one thing I'll always remember about this movie is, and this was pre like glamour vampire or whatever.
Yeah.
For the most part, I want to say, but at the same time, when I grew up watching vampire movies, you're used to like Dracula and like that kind of vision of vampires, like a Transylvanian vampire, or even like a Interview with a Vampire thing where they're kind of like, you know, more classy or whatever you want to say it, but
this is
like
well, this is 2007, so I'm not sure if this is pre-Twilight.
I think it is.
Is
like
it?
just
Okay.
pre-Twilight? Yeah,
Okay.
definitely actually. But these vampires are like old school, kind of like as if they were ripped out of like the past or something, like medieval. You know, they're like ancient vampires.
Yes, I like how they speak their own tongue, which sounded really cool. They had a cool look to them. They did look like vampire monsters. They were pale and had black eyes and nasty-looking teeth.
Yeah.
And also the way they behaved, it was very animalistic.
And also like somewhat intelligent though too.
Yes.
You get the feeling like you get in a lot of like abduction or alien movies that the villains or the monsters are smarter than the humans, and you actually kind of get that sense in 30 Days a Night. And that's what I always liked about it, that they're always like kind of outsmarting the humans and stuff. Not that the humans are super smart in that movie or anything, but yeah, no, I've always really liked that about it. There's other things I like it. Like Josh Hartnett, I think he's solid in it. He's kind of like a lighter version of Keanu Reeves, where you're just kind of like one impression the whole time, you know?
It kind of stuck out to me. I was like, okay, so clearly these guys like don't go into the cities, and we see that giant like ghost ship.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or not ghost ship, but like abandoned ship that we assume that they kind of like float around on.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know, they have these clothes, and I kind of wonder like, what do these guys do when they're not killing people? Do they just sleep, or I don't know? I was
do they just like move around from
Yeah.
town to town,
Yeah.
or do they just wait every year for Alaska? Well, no, that wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
But
I saw some of them were wearing suits, and I was like, where do they get these suits? Do they go shopping, or do they have like someone do shopping for them?
yeah, I know, and they're like nice suits too. I thought that too. yeah, well, they get the crazy guy to do that shit.
That's
so
true.
Maybe,
Yeah, I guess so.
Before the vampires get there and stuff, the movie does a really good job of setting up like the environment that it's going to take place in. And obviously, like with everyone leaving to get away from the 30 Days a Night and stuff, kind of gives it this small feel where there's only a select few people. So I don't know, it's kind of like sets up a good survival horror movie.
It does a good job of doing the whole like you're trapped there and isolated.
Board the windows. Try to hide. They're coming.
They? Who are they?
Ben Foster's character comes in, who's like the vampire's bitch or whatever. He does a great job, just straight creep.
He always does a really good job playing an antagonistic role. Like in
Yeah.
3:10 to Yuma, he was like, in my opinion, he did a better job than Russell Crowe and Christian Bale.
Really, yeah. He's really good at playing like a character who has like a few screws loose or something, you know, something not there. But yeah, I don't know. I'll always remember that character from 30 Days a Night for some reason.
I wish that they had given him some sort of an arc.
Yeah, his character just kind of
Gets
killed.
in the middle of the second act.
I think it's supposed to almost be like he's such a tragic character where he's like put his, I don't want to say life, but put a lot into like helping these vampires, and then instead of like thanking him and making him one of their own, he just kills him. And I think that's what he's going for, is he wants to be one of them, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I wish there was some sort of arc where maybe Josh Hartnett would be like, I don't care if he's a piece of shit. We got to take him with us and protect him. And then he kind of eventually joins their side, and then maybe kills a vampire at the end of the movie. That would have been
Or betrays them.
Or betrays them. That would have been a
to
decent
get in
arc.
with the vampires or something. It's almost just a shame too, because his character is actually so good in that movie that when he gets killed off, it's like
Yeah.
that sucks.
I was like, oh.
Yeah, it kind of sucks. He's really good. Yeah.
Technically, all the effects were really good.
Super good.
That decapitation of his cop friend.
Yeah.
It's top notch.
Super gory, eh?
Top
Kind
notch.
of disturbing.
It doesn't get much better than that.
Or when the guy's arm gets into the
Yeah.
at the end. There's some sick shit in that. And it's also got cool stylized gore too at some points.
Mm-hmm.
And it does have one of my favorite shots
Yes.
of recent memory still. I remember seeing this in high school, and obviously the one-shot camera. It's not even one shot. It's just the camera floating over.
Well, it's
during
a
the
long
attack.
zipline shot.
Yeah.
And it's you see black buildings, white snow, and people being killed, and there's blood being spilled in the white snow.
Yeah,
and
it's
from this
so
bird's eye
cool.
zipline shot, and it looks so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So it is a smart movie. I didn't feel dumb watching this
No.
movie.
And it's almost like a survival action movie, because
Yes.
a lot of the encounters with the vampires are action-y, one guy's fighting a couple of them, or Josh Hartnett punching a hole through one's head.
I agreed, and it didn't deliver on scares for me, but I still enjoyed it for being a good thriller, because there are some tense scenes.
Yeah.
And action I thought was pretty good. I just was really let down by the majority of the characters.
Oh yeah, I don't think any of them protagonists or anything of the movie have much to grasp onto.
No, they're
whatsoever.
very flat. They're
Yeah.
very plain, and
And I think you're supposed to care about his buddy there, but he just disappears for half the movie, and then they find him,
and then he falls apart, and then he literally falls apart. And they give Josh Hartnett and what's her name?
Melissa George.
Yes, some backstory together, and they do have a bit of an arc when they kiss at the end, but I don't really care.
No,
They didn't really give enough of you of that to latch onto.
it's almost that's more of a writing thing too, because I don't know. I thought they did a decent job
They
with their
do.
characters. They do. And I've always liked Melissa George. Actually, she's in a lot of good movies.
And I kind of wish that there had been more of an arc when he kills. I can't believe I'm actually adjusting these guys. When he kills the head vampire, right? Because all he does, it was a cool moment where you go,
Really
whoa.
sweet moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
But then afterwards, I was like, that's kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Because it was just a really good punch.
just one
It's not
swift punch to the face.
it wasn't like he had learned something.
No, he gets
and-
tossed around a bit, then he punches him through the face.
Yeah. So I was like, oh.
I guess it's supposed to be that he still has part of his human side or something, so that by mixing that with the strength of the vampire, he overcomes the vampire by punching him through the face.
And it was a really good sound in this movie. It wasn't really Hollywood
Yeah.
over the top sound effects.
Yeah.
All the punches were really real sounding.
Yeah.
And that made it added to the savagery, especially when he punches through the guy's head. Because it is
a good scene.
it's some movies would make it be
Yeah,
but this is a subtle little,
yeah,
and it's oh.
yeah, but you see it, so you're like, oh shit.
They did save showing a good shot of the vampires until
Third way through, maybe?
it was about 36 minutes. And so it's right around the end of the first act, which is tradition with horror monster movies, right? But when you do see glimpses of the vampires, it wasn't scary. Especially that shot when there's the two guys and the girl. and they've just finished up work or something like that, and they're trying to decide whose house to go to get drunk. And then a vampire runs through the shot and grabs the guy, and they disappear in a shadow. And you can totally tell it's a man, and you hear rah. And I was like, I almost went.
It almost doesn't like go very well with their image later in the movie of because I think they're supposed to be not super scary but incredibly intimidating.
Yes.
You know, and I know, and then when you fall back on your first scare being like a quick jump scare where someone gets grabbed and disappears into the dark, it's like, I don't know. One thing that I've always had a problem with this movie, and I bring it up every time I talk about it, is it's called 30 Days a Night, but you never get the impression that that movie takes place over 30 days. It legit feels like 5 or 6 nights.
I wouldn't even go that far. It feels like it's like 2 days.
Yeah, I know.
And it's like, it's not like something. And I think part of the reason of that is because it'll be like you follow them for the first day, and then it'll be like day 7, and nothing really has changed since day 1 to day 7.
It's
They're
true.
the exact same situation as they were before.
Yeah, like you'd think by the end of the movie they'd be super weak and like haggard and like hungry, you know, and stuff. But like I guess you're supposed to assume they spend like 2 weeks in that attic at one point or something. But really, it feels like a night or 2. Hellraiser. I'd probably seen Hellraiser movies, I know I had, but I don't even know if I'd ever seen the first one. Like I always know what Pinhead was and his little creepy crew of people, but watching down and actually sitting Hellraiser is like, that's an excellent movie. Like, that's like top-notch writing for a horror movie.
It is. It totally is. And I think a lot of horror movies these days should take like a page out of Hellraiser.
Yeah.
Hellraiser.
The big thing when I've finished seeing it, I remember saying or thinking, like, you don't see horror movies that are as batshit crazy as this is anymore. Like, if this came out nowadays, it would be about, like, a young couple who moved into a house and they found the box and they opened up hell and they needed to find a way to get out of it or something.
And some psychic would show up and be like, "You opened the box, didn't you?" And then that person would have all the exposition dialogue, and they would have to fight the monsters and learn how to put them back in the box, and then the movie ends.
Yeah, but this movie is like some depressed lady's married to this guy, and then you find out that she had a relationship with her brother, and then he got killed, and now he's coming back to life, and then she has to kill for him. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I thought it was really, because this movie is like about, okay, I think Freud or Jung, there was Freud and Jung, and it was one of them would always like talk about how like there's the death instinct, which is like the fear of death, but also like the fascination with death that humans have, and like the life instinct, which is sex drive. And this movie combines them together.
Totally.
And a lot of horror movies do that, like slashers, but it's usually like someone has sex and they get punished for having sex. This one is like combining literally death and torture and sex together.
Yeah.
And that's why like what's her name? Judy?
The main character?
The woman who's trying to bring
The
Frank-
crazy, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, I say the main character because the way the movie starts actually starts with a different main character than it ends, which I
Yes.
just fucking love, yeah.
But anyway, like she wants to ditch the husband she's had for a while to bring a corpse back to life because she had awesome, like, rough sex with him.
Yeah.
And that's really dark if you think.
Yeah, and then of course, like in contrast, now the man she's with is like this very respectable, like, you know, like the opposite of his brother, right? I think it definitely that Hellraiser and his crew of people, they kind of have like this weird like fetishy obsession with torturing people. So it's kind of like appropriate that they're the ones overseeing this thing about like urges and stuff when they're feeding into their own urges to torture.
Yes.
You know, it's like perfect, man. I know. It's like you never think Hellraiser would be such like a key script. And apparently that movie's made for like $1 million. It was like
Super low budget.
uber low budget. Yeah.
I read that at the end of the movie, like she points the box at like the Cenobites, and like some white lightning or yellow lightning comes out and kills them, and it looks kind of bad even for the 80s, right? And apparently Clive Barker was like, well, that's because it was super low budget, and I just hired some guy over a weekend to do to hand paint those, and I'm surprised they came out looking as good as they did.
Nice.
Because he was drunk the whole time.
Beyond any terror you have imagined. A nightmare.
No.
Unlike anything you have witnessed.
Just the whole time I was thinking, man, I don't know, for some reason I was in awe, just being like, this is actually super original. Like, fuck. Yeah, it's really good movie, and how we were talking about how then the character essentially switches. It goes from like the crazy woman to like
stepmother.
The stepdaughter, I guess you could
Yeah.
call her, or just the daughter of the husband.
Yeah.
It was funny how much like the crazy woman looked like David Bowie.
The unholy is unleashed.
One of my favorite things about this movie is the gore and the cinematography and the combination of those two. Because when that heart turns into a corpse and pulls itself out of the floor, not only is that lit and shot incredibly well, that looks awesome.
Oh, totally.
It's just incredible.
Or even like the corpse guy as he's coming back to life or whatever. Just like the makeup effects on him standing there talking to the woman or whatever there. His no skin and stuff, just super good special effects. Where now that would probably be done with like a CGI character, like in the shadows or something. Yeah, to pull off the special effects that this movie had for that amount of money is kind of insane. The opening scene of this movie is sweet. Because it's like this mini little torture thing with that Frank guy. I think it's that Frank guy, and he's like in a room, and you just see like the chains kind of connect to him and starts ripping through his skin, and then it just cuts to like introducing the main story. And it's just like you don't really see Pinhead or anything, or you might see him a bit.
You get a glimpse of some of the Cenobites, and one of their hands is going through like pieces of flesh and trying to find like a piece of his face.
And his
I'm
face,
just I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
And so it sets up this super like dark, like hellish, whatever nightmare or whatever, and then it just goes to the story. But we don't really know how that connects to anything yet, you know? So it's just like, in the back of your mind, you're like, ooh, shit's gonna get dark soon. You know?
Yeah. And it does get really dark. And
it does. That's actually like a really dark storyline for sure.
The plot of the movie starts off as you're gonna follow a woman who's gonna, like a spider, is going to lure like old businessmen back to her place so they can be killed and have like the life force sucked from them for Frank.
And I like too how the guy she was bringing back, most of them you didn't get like a super creepy vibe from it. You actually kind of felt bad. There was one guy who's like, oh, I just get really lonely and stuff.
Yes.
And then she fucking kills him brutally. I was like,
The hammer in the face.
man.
I'm not one of those, like, I'm definitely not an anti-CGI guy. But I almost feel that in horror movies, that practical effects seem to work better. I don't know why. It's almost like you can light them better and give them a gushier, sicker feeling that you can with CGI at this point. Maybe in 5 years,
it's more realistic still.
But
it's more like immediate. When we see a character, for example, who has all this gross makeup on, he looks like a corpse, and that actor's actually standing in a room with another actor. It's different than like the vampires in I Am Legend, Will Smith movie or something, where they're supposed to be creepy and stuff, but they're just clearly like, that's actually an extreme example because the CGI in that movie is terrible, but...
Or like, what was that, Warm Bodies?
Yeah, that zombie
the
movie. The
Bonesies, whatever they're called. Those black
they were
things.
terrible.
They were CGI and they didn't have any creepiness to them.
Yeah.
Whereas this did. It had presence, and you could see like, you know, slime dripping off of him and blood and pus, and it's like, ugh.
It's like the design. What are they called? Like his crew?
The Cenobites.
The Cenobites, okay. They're also suitably creepy, and most of them don't even talk, but you get a sense of character from each one. That's what I love. Like, Pinhead's like the boss, the dominant one, the smart one. Then you have like that little creepy guy who just kind of talks like this.
The woman, she's a woman.
Oh, it is a woman? Okay, that's what I thought.
With the throat pulled open.
Yeah, and then you could tell that she's like the sex slave one.
Hellraiser is also one of the few movies that still spooks me.
I can see that.
Even though I know it's a movie, I still kind of go, creepy.
Well, it's like, there's nothing really much creepier than going to hell and being tortured by that group.
Yeah, that's true.
You know? It's true, though. Like, no, like, spooky ghost movie or anything. It's really the thought of going to hell and Pinhead torturing you is terrifying. I like how like the movie, it's not about finding out about like the backstory of Hellraiser and stuff. It's just about the story the movie sets up with these characters, and then you have these crazy like Pinhead and his crew like in the background kind of doing their thing. Where it feels like a lot of the time now, again, if they made it, it would be like Pinhead origins, and it would start with like how he became Pinhead, and then it would be kind of about this protagonist, but it would connect to like Pinhead's story. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
this is almost like it
Good
gives
thing
you
Marvel can't touch this series.
yeah, it gives you answers, and this is not a good example. It's almost like a Cloverfield of horror movies, where it's like, yeah, the monster's there in the back, and it's affecting things that are going on, but that's not really the story. The story is about them trying to get out of the city or save this person. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah.
That's you really don't see much of the Cenobites. You see them in the opening sequence, and then you really don't see them again until like 3/4 of the way through the movie.
Yeah, and then Pinhead talks to her and stuff, and you get a sense of all of them. That's what makes it cool. It makes it like, you know, they're there in the background, but they're not like in your face the whole time. Like, oh, look at us, we're so creepy, we're gonna get your butt.
We'll tear your soul apart.
So, the last film on our list. Why don't you
Appropriate too,
introduce-
because it's the most Halloween-y movie
Yes.
that we're doing. It's actually one of the most Halloween vibey movies I've ever seen. I want to say
Agreed.
vibey, but yeah, that's Trick or Treat, which is a movie that came out like what, 4 or 5 years ago now.
2007, same year as 30 Days a Night.
And I was looking for a good Halloween movie because there isn't a lot of horror movies to watch around Halloween that take place during Halloween. There's like Halloween, and there's like Hocus Pocus. But yeah, when this movie came out, I freaking loved it, and I still love it. It's basically become like you watch it once a year around Halloween movie and enjoy it every time.
Yeah,
It's good. Got a good sense of humor, dark comedy almost.
absolutely, especially
Yeah.
that first sequence.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, it's just made really well, and the best thing about this movie is just the atmosphere it creates. It makes you, I don't know, when you watch it, you almost just like, even if you watch it on the 26th of October, you almost forget that it's not Halloween watching
Exactly.
it, you know? It's just,
In terms of visual style, it's nothing special. It's not overly cinematic
No.
or anything. You can tell that this is shot quite quickly.
yeah.
But it almost works because it seems to add to that, because you realize that you're watching people on Halloween and not like a, I don't know.
I know what you
better
mean.
for me.
It's almost
I
more
can't explain it.
immediate. It's
Yeah.
I don't want it to go as far as it's got like a documentary feel or anything, but it's, I don't know, it's just, yeah, very simple. You know,
Yeah.
it just tells the story really well.
I mean,
it's almost like, it's so simple that it almost like reminds you back in the days of watching like Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Very neutral.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a good way of putting it, yeah.
And I think had it been too gritty, it wouldn't have worked with certain storylines, especially like the one with the principal and the kids.
Yeah,
Because I think had that been too gritty, it wouldn't have felt like a family.
yeah.
Right?
And as dark as this movie is, I don't think it's about the darkness of Halloween. It's about like the darker magic and aura of Halloween. You know, it's not about like, oh, people getting their heads cut off and thrown on the street. It's more about like this creepy little guy who will come and cut your head off because you don't believe in Halloween. You know?
Because the opening sequence of this movie, it's the couple comes home after a party or they've been out or something like that, and
Yeah.
they're drunk, and
she
one of them is
immediately-
quite negative about Halloween, and he's quite positive Halloween. He's like, you can't just blow it out. There's rules,
Yeah,
right?
and she wants to clean up like that night.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is violating the rule of Halloween, and as a result, this kind of like angel of Halloween,
Sam.
Sam, you know, he punishes
Very
people
nice.
for breaking rules of Halloween. It's almost like a Christmas movie, in that instead of learning something really good,
Yeah.
you learn something really dark. It's like you got to do some, like you have to follow the rules of Halloween, otherwise you're gonna get killed.
Yeah, it's
right?
almost like the movie's about the spirit of Halloween, I want to say. And that character is the spirit of Halloween. So it works so well that you see him in every story of the movie and stuff, just because he is the spirit of Halloween in
Right,
the
I guess
flesh.
we should explain that this is a anthology. It's an anthology, so there's how many? 4 storylines we've woven together, and they do a really good job and a subtle job of tying them together, both at in the opening, one of the opening sequences and the closing sequence.
This is the one night.
Don't forget your costume.
All sorts of things roam free.
The Halloween School Bus Massacre.
Do you have a favorite story?
Yeah, I was gonna ask. I think my favorite's with the kids and Roberta.
Yeah.
Roberta the retard.
No, that's probably the best one though.
Yeah.
And the only I think one of the reasons too though, it's just like one of those things where I have fond memories of going out trick-or-treating as a kid on Halloween, and that's the only one where it's actually kids who go trick-or-treating and then
Well, they pull a prank and it
little
backfires
mischief.
on them, and you see that horror movie Justice.
Yeah. Which is great.
Yeah.
It's great, involving like the nerdy little girl, and she's like, "No, I'm not saving you."
Yeah, it's kind of even hard for the good-looking kid, like the guy that's with him, and you can tell that like him and is it Roberta?
I think it is.
You can tell that they're connecting, and there might be a bit of a love interest going on there. And he's the one who feels remorse for pranking her, and but no, she doesn't care.
No, and that's
Ruthless.
It's almost good too, because I think in a lot of movies they would just make that dude character just like straight evil. So when he died, it was almost just like, haha. But in this, you're like,
It's tragic.
I'm still like kind of cheering for her. You're like, haha, I got you. But at the same time, you're like, that guy might not have deserved it as much as the other ones. Yeah.
They did a really good job of like telling ghost stories, because there are a couple of ghost stories in this movie, and bringing that into like the movie.
Stories within stories. How like again with the little kid story, then it's like the bus driver story connects to that one.
And then it connects to another story later on when you find out that Mr. Krieger, or whatever his name
was the driver.
Yeah.
It's actually a really tight script when you think about it. Like all the connections and stuff. They're all subtle enough not to be in your face, but they'll connect really well.
What is that?
Wait, there's another tradition. Always check your candy.
Oh, this movie is. It must be R, right?
Oh, definitely. It's a hard R.
Hard?
Pretty hard R.
I was gonna say it's a soft R.
Really?
Because there's really not that much gore. There's a little bit. There's
But like
dark subject.
that's it though. Like
subject
the
matter?
killing of a
Okay.
kid and laughing at it and stuff. I think that's pretty R-rated or whatever. But you're right. It's not like a super like splattery movie or anything like that at all.
No.
Yeah, I don't know if that's more of like a budget thing or just. I guess again, that's
think
not
it's
really like
tone.
the tone they're going.
They're not
for.
trying to scare you so much as put you in the Halloween
Yeah,
spirit.
it's really it reminds you of watching. Like I grew up loving Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, and watching that now, it's super cheesy and stuff. But when you watch this, it's like the writers of those shows grew up and wrote Trick or Treat or something, because it's like, we could still have that sweet vibe of those shows, but we can make it super adult with dark subject matter. Finally, like it's almost a sense I've always gotten from Trick or Treat, and I think that's why it works so well.
You gotta be kidding me.
If you were to recommend one to watch on Halloween, which one?
Trick or Treat.
Trick or Treat?
Yeah, just because that like is, for me, that's like the definitive like Halloween movie. Honestly, more so than anything else. More so than Halloween even.
I agree. I agree. But I would recommend Hellraiser.
Really, that's my favorite of them probably.
Yeah, because for me, I think a lot of people haven't seen Hellraiser.
No.
And also, it delivers the most scares, in my opinion.
It's the most original.
Yeah.
And although I think you could watch Trick or Treat once a year at Halloween, out of all the three, I think 30 Days a Night is probably the most rewatchable movie.
I disagree.
Yeah, because I think you can watch it any time of the year. Actually, I think 30 Days a Night works best when you're watching it like Winnipeg late night winters. It works super good because it'll be like 11 or 12 at night. It's super dark out. There's like a snowstorm going on. It's a perfect movie to put on, you know? Trick or Treat, night before Halloween, starting to get that vibe a little bit. Throw on Trick or Treat. Hellraiser, any time of the year. Good movie. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like they all serve their purpose.
I also recommend Hellraiser because it's like educating me on how to like sexually torture people who come to my door on
Yeah.
Halloween.
Well, Hellraiser is like, I think it's actually like one of the coolest. I enjoyed the shit out of Hellraiser watching it. Really did. Yeah, great movie.